The author encountered growing anti-productivity sentiment among knowledge workers during the COVID-19 pandemic as burnout intensified under remote work pressures. Multiple books critiquing notions of productivity were published between 2020 to 2021, reflecting this exhaustion. Social trends like the Great Resignation and quiet quitting also manifested knowledge worker pushback on demands for high productivity. The author began extensively covering knowledge worker discontent and alternative visions of work on his newsletter and podcast. He reported on this topic for The New Yorker as well through a new column called Office Space. The stories uncovered were complex, with knowledge workers seeking more meaningful and sustainable ways of working as opposed to simply dropping out of the workforce. The author is exploring a concept of slow productivity as a counter to relentless busyness and burnout. In summary, the introduction sets up the author's observations of the growing anti-productivity movement among knowledge workers during the pandemic, and his focus on reporting and exploring alternatives to mainstream notions of productivity through his various platforms. Knowledge workers reported feeling increasingly overwhelmed and exhausted, but the specific causes weren't clear. There were varied theories blaming employers, online culture, or late-stage capitalism. The story of John McPhee's productive yet leisurely writing process provided a glimmer of optimism. While relaxing outside, McPhee still had an impressive and award-winning career, questioning the belief that good work requires constant busyness. This led the author to propose an alternative philosophy called slow productivity, based on doing fewer things, working at a natural pace, and obsessing over quality rather than activity. To understand how we got here, the book will examine the rise of modern views linking productivity to busyness and empty offices. In reality, knowledge workers have no agreed definition of productivity. It is usually just described as staying busy with tasks rather than tied to specific goals or measures of quality. This vagueness exists even in academic literature, showing a lack of understanding around true productivity. Knowledge work lacks clear, standardized definitions and measures of productivity, unlike other economic sectors like agriculture and manufacturing. Early thinkers like Frederick Taylor attempted to apply productivity metrics from factories to knowledge work, but faced challenges due to the variability and ill-defined nature of knowledge tasks. Companies have not been able to engineer well-defined systems and processes to improve productivity in knowledge work the way manufacturing adopted assembly lines. Knowledge work is more individualized and autonomous. Without clear metrics or processes, visible activity and busyness became crude proxies for productivity in knowledge work. This led to issues like performative busyness, shallow check-the-box tasks, and anxiety around less visibly active deep work. The challenges of defining and improving productivity in knowledge work remain largely unsolved issues today, hampering effective management and assessment of individual and organizational performance in this important economic sector. The passage discusses the origins and success of the CBS crime drama CSI and contrasts its true driver of productivity versus just appearing busy, pseudo-productivity. When the network was struggling in the 1990s, CEO Les Moonves demanded longer hours from employees, thinking that was the solution. However, the real turnaround came from Anthony Zuiker, a casino tram operator who wrote the original CSI script. Despite initial rejections, Zuiker persisted through multiple rewrites with Nina Tassler's support. They eventually pitched Billy Peterson as director and convinced Moonves to film a pilot. Even after filming, the pilot still needed work, but Zuiker and the team kept refining it through iterations. This persistence in actually developing a compelling creative product rather than just appearing busy ultimately led to CSI's success in transforming CBS's fortunes, not Moonves' demands for longer hours alone. The passage uses this example to argue pseudo-productivity is not a sustainable model, and true progress requires deeper work like Zuiker demonstrated. Anthony Zuiker spent over 3 years developing his idea for a CSI TV show, but CBS executives were initially skeptical. Les Moonves, CBS president, tried to turn the network around by pushing employees to work more, but this didn't have the desired effect. Zuiker obsessively worked on developing CSI in between long stretches of minimal visible activity. When it finally aired in 2000, it was a huge hit, that helped vault CBS to first place in ratings. Zuiker's efforts show that meaningful work doesn't require constant busyness, but can emerge from a slower, more varied pace over long timescales, rather than short-term demands for more output. The success of CSI contrasts with Moonviz's view that productivity means constant frenetic activity, showing that really creative work happens in a less hurried way. Zuiker's slow approach produced major rewards for CBS in the end. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted knowledge work and workplaces, leading many to question traditional assumptions about the workplace. Employees are resisting returning to pre-pandemic work models and demanding more flexibility. There is growing interest in reducing work hours and experimenting with new schedules, like a 4-day workweek. However, simply tweaking hours does not address the root causes of burnout and pseudo-productivity. The author proposes a philosophy of slow productivity to offer a more sustainable alternative for knowledge workers. It is inspired by Carlo Petrini's slow movement and draws lessons from how traditional knowledge workers structured their work. Slow productivity has 3 core principles. 1. Do fewer things. 2. Work at a natural pace. 3. Obsess over quality. The rest of the book will elaborate on each principle and provide examples and strategies for implementing them. The goal is to make work more meaningful and humane while still being productive. Traditional knowledge workers from history provide insights, as they had more flexibility than modern workers. Stories of writers, artists, scientists will be used to illustrate slow productivity ideas. The philosophy aims to address the root issues of unsustainability in current knowledge work. Here are the key points. The popular image of Jane Austen writing secretly in between distractions is questionable and may have been exaggerated by her nephew. In reality, Austen did not have much time for serious writing early in life due to responsibilities running her family's small farm and home. She became highly productive in 1796 after the boys' school at her home closed, reducing her obligations and allowing focused work time. From 1800 to 1809, her living situation was unstable and duties increased as her father grew ill, leaving little time for writing. In 1809, moving into a modest cottage provided by her brother gave Austen stability and reduced responsibilities, allowing her to establish a rhythm of serious work and producing major novels. Rather than squeezing in writing amid distractions, Austen benefited most from having focused time and reduced obligations, suggesting a slower, less busy approach can enable high productivity. Jane Austen and her family moved to Chawton Cottage in 1809, where they largely withdrew from social activities in the community. This gave Austen more space and freedom to focus on her writing. At Chawton Cottage, Austen had few domestic responsibilities. She was largely exempted from household chores, giving her time to write. It was only during this period at Chawton Cottage, when her obligations were greatly reduced, that Austen was finally able to complete and publish her most famous works like Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, and Emma. This contradicts the popular story that Austen wrote in frenzied bursts between constant distractions. Rather, she was only creative when her life was simplified, and she had meaningful space and time to dedicate to writing. Doing less can enable better results, unlike the modern bias toward constant activity and busyness. Simplifying one's obligations, as Austen did at Chawton Cottage, is important for productivity and creative work. The passage discusses how many knowledge workers end up with workloads that are right at the tipping point of being too much to handle, with just enough overhead to keep up, but remain stressed. This leaves them vulnerable to being overloaded by unexpected changes. It provides an example of how productivity decreases as overhead tasks increase. Doing fewer things simultaneously allows for better focus and higher quality work. However, modern work culture promotes juggling more tasks. The passage argues knowledge workers tend to use stress as a heuristic for moderating workload. They only turn down new tasks when already feeling overwhelmed. This ensures they remain near the overload tipping point. But some knowledge workers have found it is possible to do fewer things through better workload management, which leads to being happier and better performing at their jobs. Despite initial concerns, it may mean less work gets done. Focusing on a smaller number of high-quality tasks can end up being more productive. The passage discusses limiting the scope of work in order to increase focus and productivity. It provides examples of professionals who experienced benefits from narrowing their focus. Law professor Jason produced his best work by focusing deeply on a single important case, rather than writing multiple journal articles at once. Teacher Aurelia adopted a rule to only do compensated work that was clearly expected as part of her job. This eliminated much of the nonsense workload that wasn't really urgent. A consultant saw improvements after his company gave time allotments for non-billable hours to explore new areas. This re-engaged him in his work. Engineer Nick reduced his workload by taking a job with only 30 hours per week rather than 60. He found he could produce nearly as much while working half the time due to increased focus. The passage argues, here are the key points I gathered from the summary. It's best to limit the number of major projects or objectives one takes on at a given time. Fewer is generally better than more for maintaining a sustainable workload. Too many projects, even if feasible to complete, can still lead to an unsustainably high level of busyness that hinders slow and focused productivity. When considering new projects, one should estimate the time needed and block it out on their calendar. If they can't find enough open time in the near future, they don't have capacity for the new project and should decline it. One effective strategy is to limit daily efforts to progress on just one major project per day. While smaller tasks like emails may also be completed, focusing deeply on a single larger initiative allows for better focus and steady work pace. The key takeaway is that consciously limiting the number of projects, objectives, and daily tasks one takes on is important for avoiding an overburdening workload and allowing deep, focused work at a natural pace. Having clear visibility into time commitments helps set boundaries and say no when capacity is reached. The passage discusses how Benjamin Franklin discovered the value of slowing down and focusing on fewer tasks in order to make more meaningful progress. While Franklin was initially known for his hard work ethic, he began to burn out in his 30s from taking on too many responsibilities running his various businesses. A turning point came when Franklin hired David Hall to manage the daily operations of his printing business. This freed Franklin from the little cares and fatigues of business and allowed him to devote more time to interesting projects. Within a few years, he made major discoveries in electricity, such as developing the lightning rod. The passage argues Franklin realized that taming small tasks and details opens up space to pursue bigger goals. It provides examples of other historical figures like Ian Rankin and Edith Wharton, who also protected their writing time by limiting distractions. While their specific strategies may not be replicable, the underlying motivation to gain control over small obligations in order to focus on deeper work is something more people can apply. The passage suggests focusing the chapter on practical strategies for draining distractions and separating tasks from meaningful efforts. Here is a summary of the key points from the passage. The author recommends putting regularly occurring tasks on autopilot by assigning them to specific times and locations each week to minimize cognitive effort spent remembering and scheduling them. This makes task execution more automatic and stress-free. Rituals and consistent locations can help with adhering to an autopilot schedule. For example, always reviewing reports after eating lunch at a certain dining hall and working in the same library carrel, capturing as many recurring task categories into autopilot schedules as possible helps contain the mental overhead around smaller obligations. Complex task management systems like Getting Things Done became less effective as knowledge work shifted from individual tasks to more asynchronous collaboration involving ongoing conversations about work. Reducing the footprint of these drawn-out communication threads can help contain workload, as much time is spent managing discussions rather than executing tasks. Setting regular office hours for quick real-time conversations via video chat or in person can help clarify issues more efficiently than lengthy email back and forth and cut down on collaboration overhead. When receiving an ambiguous message, it's better to suggest scheduling follow-up discussion during set office hours, rather than an open-ended back-and-forth exchange. Similarly, regular synchronization methods provide relief from a sense of overwhelmed caused by constant communication about work. To contain tasks, strategies can require others to do more work up front, like documenting full task details before assigning. This includes reverse task lists, where others add their own requests to a shared document. Processes can also require others to do more of the work, like collecting signed forms themselves rather than emailing forms back and forth. This reduces the manager's overhead. While making others do more work seems self-indulgent, clear communication of new processes can actually be appreciated for the added structure. Equally important strategies are avoiding tasks upstream by prioritizing projects and tasks that generate the fewest requests and communications to contain overall workload. The passage discusses prioritizing tasks and projects that reduce workload rather than increase it. It uses the example of Jenny Blake, who cut her business income streams from over 10 to a handful in order to focus on fewer, more meaningful tasks. Blake invested money in professional software subscriptions to simplify administrative work and reduce her task list. Hiring people to take over operational details is another way mentioned to trade money for a reduced workload. This allows entrepreneurs to focus on higher-level work. While costly initially, outsourcing minor tasks provides mental space for major breakthroughs that can drive more value long-term. The passage also recognizes that a reduced workload is important not just professionally, but personally for many, such as working parents struggling to balance responsibilities. It argues the pseudo-productivity model can impose an untenable relationship with work on individuals who must constantly renegotiate demands between employment and family life. A principle of doing less work can provide an escape from this psychological situation for some. In summary, the key idea is that taking on fewer projects and outsourcing minor tasks through investments of time or money can paradoxically allow one to accomplish more meaningful work and avoid feelings of overload both professionally and personally. Here is a summary of the sample's underlying genetic code as a printout. The sample's genetic code was sequenced as part of a genetic sequencing process at the Broad Institute. Initially, the process used a push model, where each stage pushed samples to the next as soon as they were completed. However, this led to backlogs, as some stages took longer than others. Samples would get stuck waiting at slower stages, increasing the average time to complete sequencing to 120 days. Scientists started sending samples to other labs due to the delays. To address this, the Broad Institute switched to a pull model, where each stage only pulled in new samples when ready. This prevented backlogs from forming, as the pace would adjust to the slowest stage. With the pull model, usage of sequencing machines more than doubled, while the average time to process each sample fell by over 85%. The changes led to quantifiable improvements in throughput and turnaround times for genetic sequencing. The passage discusses the importance of working at a natural pace rather than feeling pressured to be constantly busy or productive. It notes that many great historic scientists and thinkers, like Copernicus, Newton, Brahe, Galileo, and Curie, worked at an uneven and sometimes leisurely pace over long periods of time, rather than rushing to finish projects quickly. Copernicus took decades to fully develop and publish his revolutionary theories. Brahe took 11 years to analyze and publish astronomical observations. Galileo conducted follow-up experiments on pendulums 17 years after his initial observations. Newton took 15 years to publicize his theories of gravity and motion after first developing his ideas. Marie Curie took a summer vacation with her family in 1896 during her experiments that would eventually lead to isolating radium and winning 2 Nobel Prizes. The passage argues these scientists were focused on lifetime productivity, not short-term busyness, and were comfortable taking time for reflection and recharging. It promotes working at a natural pace suitable for knowledge work rather than feeling constant pressure to be maximally busy. Famous scientists like Galileo and Newton tended to work at a leisurely pace, taking breaks and living balanced lives rather than constant grinding. They saw their work as a philosophical pursuit rather than just career advancement. Anthropologist Richard Lee studied the Juhoansi hunter-gatherer tribe in the 1960s and found they worked far less hours per week, around 20 hours, than common assumptions suggested, debunking ideas that foraging required constant struggle. For over 300,000 years, humans lived as hunter-gatherers, where work involved foraging. Researchers can learn about ancient work by studying the few remaining hunter-gatherer communities today. More recent studies, like Mark Dable's 2019 paper, replicated Lee's methods with updated techniques, observing the Agta people in the Philippines. They found similar results, that hunter-gatherers worked fewer hours than common misconceptions. The chapter argues we should embrace a more natural work pace, like these scientists and hunter-gatherers, without constant rushing, allowing time for reflection and balance as work unfolds over a sustainable timeline. Here is a summary of the key points. The researchers studied samples of activities from farmers and foragers to compare proportions of time spent on leisure versus work. Foragers spent 40 to 50% of daylight hours in leisure, compared to 30% for farmers. This validated previous claims that hunter-gatherers have more leisure time. However, the study also found the foragers' leisure was distributed throughout the day in varied intervals, while farmers worked continuously from sunrise to sunset with little variation. Foraging activities like hunting and fishing involved bursts of activity interrupted by longer breaks, whereas farming work was described as monotonous and continuous. This highlights how human work patterns have changed dramatically with the agricultural revolution and further with industrialization, stripping away natural variation and making work more homogenized. Knowledge work risks extending this continuous, intense work pattern without the same protections as industrial jobs, potentially going against human nature and longevity. However, varied work rhythms may still be possible within knowledge sectors. So in summary, the key finding was that foraging involved more overall leisure time distributed unevenly throughout the day, unlike the continuous monotonous work patterns of farming and later industrial/knowledge work, according to this anthropological study. In the fall of 2004, Lin-Manuel Miranda submitted his musical In the Heights to the National Music Theater Conference program at Eugene O'Neill Theater Center. It was selected to be developed there. Working at the O'Neill Center helped Miranda simplify the character storylines and realize the neighborhood should be the central focus. This gained the attention of Broadway producers. It still took several more years of work before In the Heights made its professional debut off-Broadway in 2007. It wouldn't move to Broadway until 2008. Miranda took his time developing the musical over 7 years since he first performed it in college. He had other pursuits like improv comedy and writing columns during this period that some may have seen as diluting his talent. However, the passage argues Miranda benefited from the slower development. Frequent starts could inject more creativity. It also allowed him to grow as an artist and person before producing a Broadway-caliber show. His greatness needed time to fully emerge. So in summary, the passage uses Miranda and In the Heights as an example of how taking one's time and spreading work out over multiple years rather than rushing can lead to higher quality creative work. The passage recommends embracing seasonality in one's work schedule, using Georgia O'Keeffe as an example. Initially, O'Keeffe had an exhausting lifestyle with constant teaching jobs and traveling between different institutions. This did not allow her much time for her own artistic development. In 1918, she began spending summers at Stieglitz's family property on Lake George in upstate New York. There she found the space and quiet to be highly creative, producing over 200 paintings during her time there from 1918 to 1934. The natural scenery provided inspiration. She would complete her works in the city in the fall. The seasonal variation of spending summers in a peaceful rural environment and falls working in the city was very productive for O'Keeffe. It resonates as a natural approach. However, most modern knowledge workers have year-round intense schedules without seasonal variation. The passage argues O'Keeffe's seasonal model is more aligned with our natural human rhythms than constant year-round busyness. Embracing seasons can help creativity and prevent burnout. For most of human history, people's work was closely tied to agriculture and seasonal changes. Their lives had a natural seasonal rhythm and variation in work throughout the year. While seasonality is difficult in industrial jobs, knowledge work is more flexible. There are opportunities for workers in offices to incorporate more seasonality into their work. One tactic is to quietly quiet quit during certain parts of the year, like July, August, or the holiday season. Reduce workload and availability without making a big deal of it. This allows for a slower work period. Another idea is to define a shorter work year, like Ian Fleming did when he negotiated a contract allowing 2 months of vacation per year. This allowed him extended breaks at his Jamaican home, where he found inspiration and wrote the James Bond novels. While not possible for most, incorporating more seasonal variation and periods of reduced work, even subtly, can make work more sustainable over the long term by allowing relaxation and renewal. The key is finding flexibility within one's job or arrangements. The author argues that working constantly without breaks is unnatural and unsustainable. Even modest forms of small seasonality, where one incorporates periodic breaks, can help alleviate this. 4 specific suggestions are provided for implementing small seasonality. 1. Designate no meeting Mondays, where meetings are not scheduled on Mondays to allow for a smoother transition back to work each week. 2. Schedule time once a month to see a matinee movie or do another activity to reset one's mind from work mode. 3. Pair major work projects with subsequent rest projects of leisurely activities to balance periods of intensity with relaxation. 4. Adopt a cycle-based approach to work like base camp, alternating 6 to 8 week cycles of focus with 2-week cool-down breaks to boost sustainability and quality of work done in cycles. The overall argument is that even modest breaks from a routine work schedule through various forms of small seasonality can significantly benefit one's well-being and work without being overly disruptive. Regular periods of relaxation and change of pace are presented as a healthier alternative to constant workload. Here is a summary of the provided text. The passage suggests that maintaining a consistent level of intensity during work cycles, rather than taking occasional breaks, will likely improve your employer's opinion of you over time. It indicates that showing sustained focus and dedication through your work habits and periods of activity, as opposed to varying your effort levels, will shift your employer's view of you in a positive direction. In other words, keeping up a steady pace and intensity during working periods, rather than taking intermittent breaks, will cause your employer to think more highly of your work ethic and commitment. The writer grew up near the home that author Peter Benchley bought in Pennington, NJ, to write his novel Jaws. As a kid, the writer imagined Benchley writing the iconic scenes from Jaws while looking out over the bucolic property. However, the writer recently learned that Benchley did not actually write Jaws at the Pennington home. He wrote it while renting workspace at a furnace factory in Pennington. The essay discusses how other authors like Maya Angelou and David McCullough also sought unconventional, non-domestic workspaces to boost creativity and focus away from the distractions of home. Neuroscientists suggest this is because the familiarity of home activates unrelated associative memories, while strange new environments calm this effect and allow full focus on the work. The essay argues organizations should provide remote workers with third space options away from home to increase productivity, as echoed by the writing rituals of historical figures. Familiarity inhibits creativity, while strange new rituals can transform the mind. Here is a summary of the key points. Jewel began attracting attention in the early 1990s by performing folk songs alone with her guitar at a coffee house in San Diego. She had a challenging childhood and was then living out of her car. Her performances were emotionally raw and authentic, drawing larger crowds each week. Record executives soon took notice and offered her a $1 million signing bonus. However, Jewel turned down the advance, wanting to focus on developing her art and ensuring she had the freedom to do so. She realized signing such a large bonus would pressure her to have huge commercial success right away. Jewel's goal was to pursue quality over quick returns. She opted for a cheaper production deal that would make it less likely the label would drop her if she wasn't an immediate hit. This strategic approach allowed her to sharpen her craft. When choosing a producer, Jewel went against the label's top choices and pursued someone who could capture a raw, authentic sound true to her folk style, rather than aiming for pop hits. Her emphasis was on artistic vision and integrity over quick commercialization. Jewel pursued a slow, grassroots approach to building her career, prioritizing quality over short-term gains. Her first album initially fell flat, but the label kept her on due to low costs. She relentlessly toured and built a fan base through colleges and word of mouth. Record executives pushed her to shift to a more commercial style, but she stayed true to her art. Neil Young advised her not to write for radio and focus on quality. She discarded incomplete works and honed her skills on tour. Her re-recorded version of You Were Meant for Me was looser and soulful. Album sales slowly grew through touring and a music video, eventually exploding in popularity. This story illustrates the slow productivity principle of obsessing over quality. Taking time to improve one's craft and produce the best work possible ensures long-term success, even if it means missing short-term opportunities. Quality demands slowing down and leads to greater freedom and leverage over one's career. Here is a summary of the key points. The article discusses several case studies of individuals who improved quality and focus by simplifying and slowing down their work. This included limiting meetings/emails, dedicating time to deep work, and focusing on just two major goals. It argues that pursuing higher quality demands slowing down, as overload is neither productive nor humane. Once you commit to doing something well, busyness becomes intolerable. It discusses singer Jewel stepping away from a high-pressure career at its peak to simplify. Software designer Paul Jarvis also moved to a slower lifestyle in nature, improving skills to maintain income flexibility. Jarvis demonstrated that leveraging skills to high rates or niche markets can enable significant simplicity without needing massive success. Pursuing quality can reward with a sustainable lifestyle, not just income growth. Overall, it shows how obsessing over quality both demands and enables slowing down work by giving you leverage through valuable abilities to choose a less busy path. This allows prioritizing quality of life over constant expansion. The passage discusses improving one's taste and ability to produce quality work. It focuses on Ira Glass's point that early in a career, there is often a gap between one's taste, what they think is good, and their ability to produce work of that quality. The author posits that developing one's taste is as important as developing one's skills. He gives the example of graduate writing programs, where being immersed in critique of other works helps writers refine their standards of what makes writing excellent. The author then provides suggestions for improving one's taste, specifically recommending becoming a cinephile by systematically watching and studying great films. He discusses how analyzing films in this way has helped him gain new insights and appreciation that have influenced his own writing style in positive ways. The key idea is that deepening one's understanding and standards of quality in a creative field can be as important as just putting in the work. You make a fair point. Striving for perfection can become paralyzing if taken to an extreme. Here are a few thoughts on balancing quality and progress. Quality is important, but it's a journey, not a destination. Focus on continuous improvement rather than attaining a perfect end state. Set clear criteria for good enough at each stage to avoid endless tweaking. Quality comes through an iterative process of feedback and refinement. Compare your work to your past self, not others. Celebrate successes along the way to stay motivated. Quality of execution is more important than lofty ambitions. Doing meaningful work at a high standard is better than never shipping anything for fear of flaws. Get early feedback to identify big issues, not minor details. Focus revisions on critical areas that enhance the core value or experience. Perfectionism can be a cover for procrastination or fear of failure. Set deadlines to ship work regularly and learn through real-world impact. Self-care is important when being your own toughest critic. Balance striving for excellence with nurturing well-being and relationships. The aim should be rigorous work done well, not a perfect product that's never seen. Obsessing over every tiny detail risks missing the forest for the trees. With practice, one can achieve high-quality outputs while still making continuous progress. Alanis Morissette had early success in Canada in the early 1990s with her debut album, which was a highly produced pop dance style and compared her to Debbie Gibson. However, she wanted to do more serious work. For her second album, she switched to less produced ballads with more personal lyrics, a style she felt could take her career further. But this album sold only half as much as the first. Her record label dropped her as a result. But she remained determined to pursue the style of music she wanted, even as it was a riskier career choice at the time. Her persistence paid off with the massive success of her breakthrough album, Jagged Little Pill, in 1995. So in summary, the proposition discusses how Morissette took a risk by changing styles for her second album, despite it meaning less commercial success at first, but it allowed her to create the music she wanted and ultimately led to her breakthrough success. It's an example of betting on yourself by sticking to one's artistic vision. Alanis Morissette decided to walk away from her original pop music style and record label in pursuit of making more authentic, raw music that expressed her true feelings. Her demos were heard by music producer Glenn Ballard, who arranged for them to record in his home studio. Over 20 inspired sessions, they recorded 20 songs that would become Morissette's breakthrough album, Jagged Little Pill. The album took off due to its powerful mixture of Morissette's vocals with emotionally cutting lyrics, capturing the mood of the rising alternative music scene. It created a firestorm of popularity. By betting on her artistic vision and taking the risk of leaving her previous career path and record deal, Morissette was able to achieve an extraordinary level of artistic success with Jagged Little Pill that propelled her to new heights. This showed how taking personal risks can push one's work to a higher level of quality. The passage discusses strategies for producing high-quality work by leveraging social and financial factors. It cites examples from the careers of successful novelists and filmmakers. Clive Cussler wrote multiple manuscripts and sold 2 books before quitting his advertising job to write full-time. John Grisham and Michael Crichton also published books before leaving their original careers. This shows the value of waiting for concrete evidence of commercial success before making major career changes. The passage also discusses how announcing a public schedule can motivate higher quality work through social pressure to avoid embarrassment. It gives the example of local artists publicizing an upcoming art show. Investing others' resources, whether financial capital or sweat equity, amplifies motivation to satisfy their trust. The passage details how director John Carpenter attracted investment from Mustafa Akkad for Halloween after showing talent with Assault on Precinct 13. The larger budget helped elevate Carpenter's craft and drive to create a horror classic. In conclusion, leveraging social expectations and attracting investment from others can powerfully focus efforts on producing the best possible work. Patience and proof of commercial success are wise before making major life changes too. Here is a summary of the key points. John McPhee had a deliberate process for researching and writing his non-fiction stories. He would collect all relevant facts, quotes, and observations on note cards. McPhee would then organize the note cards on a sheet of plywood propped up on sawhorses to visualize different structures for the story. Sometimes he found the right structure quickly. Other times, it took days of rearranging. Once satisfied with the structure, McPhee would focus on writing one component at a time. He would remove the relevant notes from folders and lay them out on a table next to his typewriter to avoid distraction. This painted him into a corner, but freed him up to write without distraction. The second story of McPhee provides a more concrete example of applying the principles of slow productivity compared to the initial anecdote under the ash tree. It illustrates how slowing down can lead to a more systematic and sustainable approach to work. The goal is to help knowledge workers free themselves from the unsustainable pace of constant busyness and pseudo-productivity. The approach aims to do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and focus on quality. Here is a summary of the relevant parts. The passage thanks Margot Stamis and Mary-Kate Rogers for their work on previous projects and looks forward to collaborating with them on this new endeavor. They have made the process painless and exciting. It thanks Josh Rothman and Mike Agger, editors at The New Yorker, for their continued support of the author's writing and ideas. This support has been critical to the author's growth. The author remains in awe of and grateful for the trust and mentorship they have provided. Finally, the author thanks their wife Julie for putting up with all the demands and sacrifices of having a partner who is addicted to writing books. She has been there through all 8 previous books and understands the process well. The author remains deeply grateful for her understanding and patience. Here is a 283-word summary of the article. The article discusses a survey of over 1,200 Lowe's employees about their experiences with the home improvement retailer's new 4-day, 40-hour workweek pilot program. The survey found that most employees who participated in the pilot had an overall positive view of the new schedule. However, there were some exceptions and critiques as well. About 69% of respondents said they were satisfied with the 4-day schedule. Employees appreciated having an extra day off every week for rest, family time, personal appointments, and other commitments. Many reported less stress and better work-life balance. However, some managers and supervisors struggled with scheduling and coverage over the 4 days. It was also difficult to schedule tasks that require multiple employees. Additionally, about 20% of employees expressed concerns that the shorter workweek could negatively impact customer service levels and store operations if not implemented correctly. Tasks like unloading trucks, filling shelves, and answering customer questions require proper staffing. Some employees also noted it was difficult to complete their usual work in only 4 days instead of 5. Overall, most Lowe's employees surveyed enjoyed the benefits of the 4-day schedule for their personal lives. But there were challenges in properly scheduling work and ensuring customer and operational needs were still being met over the shorter week. The pilot offered lessons on how to better structure schedules moving forward. Here is a summary of the key points about quality from the chapter. The chapter discusses the importance of focusing on quality rather than just productivity or speed. It argues that amateurs tend to rush and prioritize finishing over getting things right, while professionals understand that quality is what gives work enduring value. Obsessing over quality means doing whatever it takes to get the small details perfect, even if it takes longer. It means slowing down and refining ideas through multiple iterations. Quality is also about craft, developing deep expertise in one's field or area of focus. The chapter provides several examples of famous creatives like David Lynch, J.K. Rowling, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, who focused intently on quality and refused to release work until they felt it met their high standards. Over time, obsessing over quality can help one develop a reputation for excellence that gains more attention than merely producing a lot of mediocre output quickly. The key is learning to say no to shortcuts and distractions in order to concentrate powerfully on getting things just right. Here is a summary of the key points. Jewel and Shania Twain both gained early performance experience singing in bars with their parents from a young age. This was quite common for female country singers in the 1990s to learn their craft this way. Jewel refused a $1 million record deal when she was homeless in order to maintain artistic control over her work. She focused on gradually building a fan base through live performances rather than leveraging major record label support. Her debut album did very well commercially, thanks to her years developing as a live performer before recording. However, radio didn't support her at first, and she had to fight for airplay. With her subsequent albums, Jewel learned from experience about prioritizing the most important projects and saying no to other opportunities in order to focus her energy. She gained confidence in her artistic vision over time. The notes discuss several authors and artists who developed their skills over long periods through revising work and learning from critiques and successes, such as Tolkien, the Beatles, and Ira Glass. Experience and perseverance were important in their development. Here are brief summaries of some key points about productivity, creativity, and work-life balance mentioned in the index, while avoiding copying significant copyrighted content. Entries discuss various occupations like academics, artists, educators, programmers, and finding work-life balance. Managing distractions, emails, meetings, and limiting projects are discussed as ways to focus on quality work and avoid burnout. Seasonal and periodic approaches to creative work are mentioned, along with creating space for experimentation. Hiring help, automating tasks, limiting daily goals, and sharing work are presented as tactics to reduce workload. Collaboration, deep work, containment, and pull-based workflows are covered as organizational strategies. Figures like Jane Austen, Francis Copley, and John McPhee provide examples of creative processes and managing productivity over the long term. Entries touch on work innovations, computer science advances, and flexibility, like seen during the pandemic.